Hey, friends, grace and peace. This is an introduction to our Peace and Power Bible study. Good news. The gospel is good news for every person and every part of life. Over the next 10 lessons, we are going to be looking at the gospel, and we're going to be looking at it in a way that may be a little bit different than what you're used to. What I say isn't going to be as important as what you learn. So often when we present the gospel, the fancy guy in the suit up front shares the gospel with you, and all you are required to do is just sit there, shake your head yes, and listen. This is one of the weakest ways to learn something, just hearing it. So we are going to engage the gospel where you hear it, you say it, you apply it, you write it in ways that enhances our learning process so that by the time this is over, you will truly know what the gospel is. And I hope an expert level. Now, this goes for the longtime Christian can work through this, but also if you're not a Christian at all, if you're just exploring Christianity and want to know what Christians believe, we are going to be going over the idea that is central to the Christian faith, the gospel, the good news, in a way that by the end of even the first week, you'll have a grasp on what Christianity is and what Christians believe. Now, let's just roll through some of the weeks. The first week, we're going to be talking about what is the gospel. We are going to be looking at it in a way where hopefully by the end of the night, you will have written down the content that needs to be shared when someone says they have shared the gospel, those core key ideas that make up what the gospel is. Then we're going to look at how the gospel engages certain questions. There are certain questions that everybody asks about life. We're going to look over these and see how the gospel engages each of those questions, the gospel and questions. Then, following that, we'll come up with about 5 questions, and following that, those questions will be each one of the week's lessons. So, we're going to talk about the gospel and relationships. How does the gospel apply to who we love, who loves us, and how we treat everybody in our relationships? Then, we're going to talk about the gospel and the good life, how the gospel informs how I ought to live. What should I be striving for as the good life? We're also, the next week, we're going to talk about the gospel and purpose. What is it that I should be doing? How can I use my limited resources of time, energy, money, skill, talent to do something worthwhile? How does the gospel inform my purpose? The gospel and belonging. Where do I belong? Where should I call home? How does the gospel informs the place where I feel like I fit in? And finally, the gospel and beliefs. Not only what is true, but who do I trust and how do I find out the truth? How does the gospel inform our belief systems, our world views? Now, we're going to switch off the questions and then we're going to talk about the gospel and the journey. We're going to look at how the gospel influences our justification, our sanctification, and our glorification. How the gospel informs now, the future, and the end of all things. The gospel and the journey. Now, just as we look through this, we're going to also talk about what is not the gospel. Sometimes some things pretend to be the gospel, which they aren't. We're going to hopefully learn the gospel in such a way that we will recognize when somebody takes something away from the gospel or when somebody adds something to the gospel. What is not the gospel? And finally, we're going to talk about the gospel and your life. This will be an opportunity for us to talk about how the gospel has impacted our individual lives in a way that we tell stories about what's going on in our lives and how the gospel is involved in those stories. Thank you for just hanging out. As always, there will be two ways to engage on this. You can join us live Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom, and the links will be on my website. You will also be able to do weekly wrap-ups like this on YouTube and WordPress. Join us for those. And finally, I'm on social media. Links are in the description. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, and YouTube. Find me, follow me, like, subscribe, click on all those sorts of things. Well, I hope you are interested in the gospel as I am and decide to join us for one of these or all of these lessons in the future. I look forward to seeing you again.